Well, if it's Thursday morning, if it's 9:30 in the morning, it must be time for the About Mansfield Consumer Advice Series. Today's episode, we're focusing on your trees because I don't know anybody in Mansfield, any homeowner in Mansfield that doesn't own a tree. And so this is right up your alley. And of course, unless you're living in a condo or in an apartment, yeah, everybody owns a tree. But is everybody growing their tree and taking care of their tree properly? And that's why we bring in our local friendly arborist. Cameron Scott is here, and Cameron, you're actually out today. Last week you were in the office. This time you're in the car because you're out working on people's trees.
That's right.
So
Yep.
whereabouts are you today?
Right now I'm in North Arlington, north of 30, kind of by the golf course, if you know what that is. And later today I'll make my way towards kind of mid Arlington near the lake.
The man has a mobile office. It's so Cameron Scott. All right, let's get into it because again, everyone owns a tree, and the question really is then how do we properly take care of this tree? And that doesn't mean just pruning and picking up, raking the leaves and stuff, but fertilizing the soil. Eh, To me, it's just like, well, first of all, let's talk about the fertilization. What would be used to fertilize the soil? And then we'll get into what does fertilizing the trees actually do?
Sure. So fertilizer, it's basically tree food. It's a number of different nutrients that are put together in a formula that the tree needs to grow and prosper. Now, there are certain nutrients that are going to be present in the soil already, but because we're dealing with urban trees, there's likely some sort of deficiency there. So the goal would be to replenish the soil of its naturally occurring nutrients, stuff like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. But in some cases, it might be some lesser known nutrients like manganese or even iron. So what you really need to do is send a soil sample to a diagnostic lab, see what your specific soil has going on in it, see what it's deficient in, and then go from there.
And you mentioned the words urban trees. Would that be another way of saying non-native trees?
Not necessarily. That just means that the trees that aren't growing in a natural forest.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you look out in the forest, I mean, no one's fertilizing those trees, and they're doing just fine, right?
Because Mother Nature has its cycle of the leaves fall, and see that's isn't that also that's when the homeowner goes out every fall and rakes up the leaves, they're actually removing nutrients from replenishing the tree. Is that correct?
Exactly right. So yeah, in a forest, there's a whole dynamic ecosystem that's happening there. There's trees, of course, lower shrubs, fungal ecosystems, animals, leaf litter, all that stuff is working together in a constant cycle of nutrients. So a tree grows big and strong, storm comes through, knocks it down, starts to decompose. Those nutrients are returned to the soil. A new tree starts growing, uses those same nutrients, grows big and strong, and then that cycle just continuously repeats itself over time. Now, in a urban setting, in a yard or in a parking lot, I mean, it's just grass under there. And anything that falls or starts to decompose is usually removed by the homeowner. So it's important to keep up on fertilization because that nutrient cycling that is not happening can really result in a depleted soil over time.
Can you give me an example of a condition that a tree may be going through? Let's say, for instance, brown leaves, or so a condition that a tree is going through, and then what type of fertilization would help that tree?
Well, typical symptoms of a nutrient deficiency is going to be a yellowing tree. Maybe you'll see what's known as chlorosis, where you can kind of the veins on the leaves are darker green, while the rest of the leaf is either yellow or light green. Maybe it's just as simple as maybe it's just a thinner canopy than it used to have. Browning leaves, that's typically a different issue, but we can talk about that another day.
That's another time, another day. All right.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, it really is necessary, especially here in Mansfield, where everybody owns a tree. It is necessary to fertilize your trees.
Oh yes, yes. I recommend getting on a 6 month cycle where you have a company come out and fertilize. I mean, that's what I do at my trees at my house. That's just about as long as the fertilizer will last in the soil. So it's important to keep that constant supply going.
It's not just a one and done, because I always assume that you go to the nursery, you buy your little tree, you dig a
Hmm.
hole in the ground, you plop it in, and you're one and done. You maybe put a little nutrient in there, but you're saying this every 6 months?
I'm saying, yeah, every 6 months, but it's also important to get that soil sample sent into a diagnostic lab so you're certain that you're putting the right stuff in there. You could there's a lot of products out there you can just blast with nitrogen. But if it's deficient in manganese or iron, then that problem's not really being addressed. And there also could be other issues at play, like maybe there's a pH imbalance, and we need to get that pH down to the optimum range, and that's an issue. So it really kind of hinges on that soil test and seeing what the results come back with.
I want to get your opinion on this, because one of my neighbors, when I lived out on the West Coast, used to do this in order to build up the iron for his trees. Is that he would take uh, large bolts, say like a 4 or 5 inch bolt, and just plunge it into the ground and just leave it there, because eventually the bolt is going to turn into rust. Rust is going to turn into iron. Iron is going to feed this. Obviously, it's going to take some time for this to happen. But he used to take like 4 or 5 just big mechanical bolts and just shove them into the ground around the roots of these trees. And have you ever heard of anyone doing that? And do you recommend that?
I can't say that I've ever heard of that, and I can't imagine how that would supply the soil with iron. Usually, the nutrient has to be in a very specific form. So, for example, how we supply iron to trees is through a sugar chelate, where the sugar is what is taken up by the plant, and it has iron attached to it. So it's getting iron that way. Um, uh, Taking up iron, just plain old iron like that, I don't know that that'd be super effective.
I'll have to call him up and say, hey, Cameron knows his stuff, and he says no. Stop with the bolts.
Sure.
All right. So yes, trees do need fertilization. It is necessary to fertilize trees. You need to go to the lab every 6 months to have your soil analyzed if you really are interested in properly taking care of your trees. Any final words on this Thursday morning?
Um, Nothing comes to mind. You caught me off guard.
Ah, all right. Cameron Scott, again, we call him your local friendly arborist. If someone had more questions about how to properly fertilize their tree, or how to, yes, I was going to uh, maybe make another joke about bolts and nuts and bolts and stuff. But anyway, how do people get a hold of you, Cameron?
You can give my office a call at 817-656-8733, or shoot me an email at cscott@bartlett.com. That's CSCOTT@BARTLETT.com.
That's Cameron Scott, your local friendly arborist. Go out and make it a great Thursday, Cameron.
All right, I'll try.
We'll do it next week.
Sounds good.